Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Welcome. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. The Coutts 2 received their sentence at the Lethbridge courthouse earlier today. BCN's Landon Hickok will have the latest. Winnipeg fashion mogul Peter Nygard received his sentence as well today, following sexual assault convictions in Toronto. And Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer was in British Columbia, blasting the Liberal government, explaining how he believes Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's policies continue to hurt Canadians.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Anthony Olienick and Chris Carbert, commonly known as the Coutts 2, were sentenced to 6.5 years each on Monday. The two men were found guilty on charges of unlawful possession of firearms and mischief from their roles in the blockade of the Coutts border back in 2022. BCN's Landon Hickok has the details from the Lethbridge courthouse.
That's right, Hal. It's been 3 months since the trial began for Chris Carbert and Anthony Olienick, and sentencing was just heard for the two men who were initially charged of conspiring to murder police officers, but were since acquitted. However, they were charged and found guilty of possession of firearms for dangerous purpose to the public peace, as well as mischief, and Olienick separately an unlawful possession of explosives. Justice David Lebrenz gave his sentencing for the two men. They've each been handed 6.5 years sentences. For Olienick, it was 6 years on the firearms charge, 6 months concurrent on the mischief charge, and 6 months consecutive on the unlawful possession of an explosive charge. For Carbert, almost the same thing, except he's been given 6.5 years on the firearms charge and 6 months concurrent on the mischief charge. Each man have been serving time in remand since their arrest in a total of 1,409 days. That is time and a half, and in which is closer to 4 years in time served. They are looking at 963 days remaining. The justice accepted that the two men saw the blockade as a last-ditch stand against governmental restrictions, and that the weapons Carbert brought, he declined that they were for hunting use and that they were sorely for engaging with police. Olienick's defense lawyer, Marilyn Burns, has stated that she will appeal the sentencing and the charges that are left on the two men, stating that this trial has been political since the start.
The sentence is excessive with strong political features, and it will be appealed. Justice Lebrenz commented extensively regarding the political nature of the protest, about the men choosing to come to the protest despite having other avenues using democratic reform. He decided on his own, and he considered the danger to the police to be high. I would disagree with that, but that's his decision, and I have developed respect for Justice Lebrenz, although in many respects I disagree with him.
So we will see what appeals come by either the defense or the Crown, but for now, it is 6.5 years for both Anthony Olienick and Chris Carbert for their roles at the Coutts border blockade. For Bridge City News, I'm Landon Hickok.
Now, many supporters of Carbert and Olienick flooded the courthouse to bear witness to the two men's sentencing, and many were left disappointed as a result. One supporter and former Fort Macleod Town Councillor Marco Van Hugenbos shared his thoughts as he's also facing charges of mischief from the blockade.
6.5 years when we have violent criminals on parole, violent reoffenders in the public, and we have men here who were involved in a political protest. It was a political protest during unprecedented times, and none of that, unfortunately, has made its way into the court. And I feel that this is a travesty of our justice system, and I feel that what happened here today sets a very, very dangerous precedence for proceedings in Canada moving forward.
The Emergencies Act was called into effect based on the Coutts issue that happened at Coutts. Now, if that all of a sudden was to go away, or a very light sentence on that, then automatically that the Liberal government enacting of that Emergency Act doesn't look so good. It's already been deemed unconstitutional, and if there was nothing here to hold any evidence or any grounds to it, then it also becomes illegal. So I believe there's a lot of political pressure still involved, even in the decisions today.
Former Winnipeg-based fashion mogul Peter Nygard has been sentenced to 11 years in prison for sexual assault convictions in Toronto. His actual time behind bars works out to about 7 years after accounting for time already spent in custody. Nygaard's lawyer argued for a 6-year sentence, citing the 83-year-old's age and poor health. The Crown, however, was seeking 15 years.
What the jury found happened to these ladies is something that proliferates through our society, and really steps have to be taken all in every way forward to eradicate the use of myths and stereotypes and violence against women. This case just happens to be one on which there was a particular spotlight. It doesn't surprise me that he's going to try to appeal this. Mr. Nygaard has been able to advance a robust defense, and as Justice Goldstein commented, has a team of lawyers.
There's a lot left to do before that appeal is filed, and I'm not in a position to say the grounds precisely at this point in time. Yeah, it was a lot of work, and there was a timeline that was very, very rushed based on the circumstances that had occurred before I came on board. So I can't say that Mr. Nygaard necessarily got all of the evidence before the sentencing court that we would have liked him to have been able to put before the sentencing court.
Nygaard was convicted of 4 counts of sexual assault in November, but was acquitted on a 5th count, along with forcible confinement. Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer discussed Liberal policies, which he says is making life that much harder for Canadians. Talking to reporters in Nanaimo, British Columbia, Scheer says communities feel less safe, and many of those communities no longer have affordable housing.
Our communities aren't just less safe. People are living in fear. Violent crime is up across the board after Justin Trudeau's decision to implement a catch and release policy for bail. We hear this from police associations from coast to coast in every province and almost every city, that the crime wave terrorizing Canadian communities is a direct result of Justin Trudeau's changes to Canada's bail system, making it easier for dangerous and repeat offenders to get back on the street, often the very same day that they're arrested in the first place, only to reoffend. Housing has driven so many Canadians out of their homes. There was a RE/MAX report this week that showed that 14%, 1 out of every 7 mortgage holders in Canada, believe that they will have to sell their home because they won't be able to afford their mortgage renewal. This is a direct result of Justin Trudeau's policies.
Federal Health Minister Mark Holland launched a new ad campaign he says will ensure public awareness of the Canadian Dental Care Plan. Holland says more and more dentists across the country are jumping on board the federal government's plan.
We've gone from 40% of dentists participating now to about 55% of dentists. That means in every province in the country, we are now over 50% of dentists participating. And I'm pleased to be able to say nationwide that we have now crossed 80% of dentists who are participating. I can look at Manitoba. Manitoba had one of our lowest rates. It has now caught Quebec at 84% of dentists who are participating.
A funeral was held in suburban Philadelphia on Monday for former Calgary Flame star Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew. A bus brought family members and players to St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church in Media, Pennsylvania. Dozens of others walked in for the service more than 2 hours before it began. The Gaudreau brothers were fatally struck by an alleged impaired driver on August the 29th while they were cycling near their childhood home in New Jersey. They were there to be groomsmen at their sister Katie's wedding the next day. A Pakistani man living in Canada could face up to 20 years in prison for allegedly planning a mass shooting in New York to support the Islamic State. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has more on the case involving 20-year-old Mohammed Shahzad Khan, who is accused of plotting an attack on a Jewish center in Brooklyn.
He wanted to attack the Chabad headquarters in Brooklyn, where many people from around the world, Jews and Christians alike, believing in this spiritual rabbi of Chabad who passed away. That's the headquarters of their organization. Go to pay pilgrimage, they go to visit, they go to pray. He wanted to do a mass shooting there to get the highest number of casualties. And thankfully, that plot was foiled with this collaboration.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, will also have the latest on the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, along with the Ukraine-Russian war. That's coming up in the second half of our program. Well, our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, and her family live in Los Angeles, and the wildfire situation in that region continues to worsen as temperatures continue to hover at or above 35 degrees Celsius. There's an out-of-control wildfire in the foothills of a national forest located just east of Los Angeles, which is threatening around 35,000 homes and buildings. It is also forcing hundreds of residents to flee amid that days-long heat wave. Officials with Alberta wildfires say nearly 7 weeks after wildfire forced the evacuation of Jasper National Park, the blaze is now officially under control. They say the change in status means the fire has been suppressed to ensure it won't spread outside of its defined perimeter. That area is around 278 kilometers long. A wildfire in the region burned nearly a third of the townsite structures. Incident Commander Landon Shepard says there's still a good chance that smoke, along with some flames, will still be visible inside the fire area right into early winter. Around 5,000 residents from Jasper and 20,000 visitors to Jasper National Park were ordered out of the area in late July due to the wildfire. Calgary city officials say residents in the Stampede City are continuing to use more water than the city system can manage, while a major pipe is once again down for repairs. Residents and business owners used 509 million litres on Sunday. City officials have said anything over 500 million litres will make the situation critical as the city struggles to refill reservoirs. Mayor Jody Gondek says construction is on schedule and there should be a return to normal water use by September the 26th. Former Lethbridge City Councillor Rob Miyashiro has been chosen by members of the Alberta NDP to represent the party in an upcoming by-election in the Lethbridge West riding. Miyashiro beat out two-time former Lethbridge City Councillor Bridget Mearns. Turnout for the nomination was just over 1,100 of the 1,516 eligible voters. The United Conservative Party, meanwhile, is set to pick its nominee on September the 23rd. No date has been called yet for the Lethbridge West by-election, but Premier Smith must announce one by January 1st of next year. Banning cameras at all intersections along with provincial roads and connecting roads has been one of the proposed changes to LPS in the city of Lethbridge. Lethbridge Police Chief Shahimi Dizadeh says another proposal put forward by a small percent of the community is to allow the use of speed cameras, but only in playground, school, and construction zones. Medizadeh explains what the response is to the proposed changes within the automatic traffic enforcement program.
The key point here is, first of all, these devices have proven to be successful in their deployment, and over the years they have proven to be reducing the speeds at the locations that they've been deployed in, and also the number of traffic infractions that they're supposed to catch, mostly red light cameras and speeding. And that's supported by also a reduction in the revenues over the last 5 years, which amounts to about 41% reduction in revenues. Simple fact is, you don't speed, you don't go through red light, you won't get a ticket.
The dollars that come from photo radar does come to the city. It doesn't go into a coffer that can be used for anything. It goes into safety measures, and so if it's from signage, if it's different safety initiatives within our community. So yeah, it all stays within those safety measures. That's what the dollars go towards.
Officials say if the ATE is reduced and they turn to the traditional way of dishing out tickets, it'll mean having more officers work overtime, which will then cost taxpayers more money. You know, when a disease enters our lives, it can simply be devastating, not only for ourselves, but also for our family members. It takes a toll physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and even financially. It is then when helping hands are needed to really show support that goes beyond words. Macy Zaruka is a young Southern Alberta wife and mom of two who's facing a devastating diagnosis of mesothelioma, a type of cancer. During her medical treatments, she will be unable to work to help provide for her family. Her employer of 10 years, LA Chefs Catering, has launched a GoFundMe campaign to support her through her journey. Tasha Hogg, marketing coordinator with LA Chefs Catering, discusses really how much they hope to raise during the campaign.
Well, right now, our goal on GoFundMe is set for $50,000, but really, we're just hoping to raise any amount of money for Macy and her family, as anything would really help at this point. She's always been such a kind and calming spirit. And when we heard about her diagnosis, our hearts just sank. And we knew we needed to step in and really help out in any way possible. We hope we can support her during this time to hopefully take off any financial type of burden she may be feeling, and so that she can spend it with her family. We love Macy, and we really hope to raise as much money as we can for her, because while this diagnosis I know would be tough for anyone, it's really tough to hear about it for her, because she's just such a kind mom and person in general.
According to the Canadian Cancer Society, mesothelioma is a group of cancer cells that can grow into and destroy tissue within the body. And if not treated right away, it can spread all throughout the body. Ron Buckshot Barge hosted a variety show and a very popular kids show in Calgary for 30 years, making it one of the longest-running kids programs in Canadian history. His family recently shared memories of growing up with their father, whom they say had a knack for people. Ron Barge sadly passed away last month at the age of 87.
I was 2 when he started March 13th, 67. He started Buckshot, so.
Wow, look at that.
Yeah, bird the hat. And a bear. And a bear.
Dad's trick was never to talk down to people. Right? He just talked to you. Even if you were a puppet, you got talked to.
Yeah.
So that was, you know, if you're talking about different types of learnings, that's a great learning to have. Because when you talk to somebody, they learn. If you talk down to somebody, it's like, yeah. So,
No condescending.
Never.
And that's why kids were, like even my children, so his grandsons and his great grandsons, he always talked to them like they're people. And so kids were just drawn to him. And no matter even if they weren't his grandsons, they could be whoever. The children were just drawn to him. They just were. My first memory of Dad that he was like famous, I guess you could say, here in Calgary would be we went to Chinook Center, and this was back in the Woodward's day, so a long time ago. His voice was very recognizable. He was too, but his voice was really distinctive. And so yeah, all of a sudden we have like 20 people surrounding us, asking for autographs and stuff. And I can remember just looking at my mom and going, well, he's just my dad. Why are all these people standing around him? Because it just didn't make sense to me. The Buckshot thing was his job, and we ran home from school to watch it too.
And so did I. Great memories watching the Buckshot show growing up in Calgary. James Earl Jones, the voice of Darth Vader, has passed away. The famous film, TV, and theater actor with the unmistakable baritone died on Monday morning at his home in Dutchess County in New York. After overcoming a profound stutter as a child, Jones established himself as one of the pioneering black actors of his generation, amassing an incredible career spanning 60 years. It all began with his debut on Broadway back in 1958. Jones also has more than 80 film credits, including Star Wars, Conan the Barbarian, Field of Dreams, and The Sandlot. He also had over 70 TV credits. Jones won 2 Tony Awards and 2 Emmy Awards. James Earl Jones was 93 years old. Well, we enjoyed lots of sunshine again today, and it was fairly hot across much of southwestern Alberta. Tonight in Lethbridge, expect a mainly clear sky with a low near 9 degrees. Tuesday, things should cool down considerably. Expect a low-pressure system to roll in, bringing in clouds and a daytime high of only 23. The mercury will drop even further on Wednesday with a high around 20 degrees. Thursday and Friday, we should see showers and a high of only 16 degrees. Saturday, the rain cloud should leave us and the temperature should increase to about 23. Cloudy with a high near 24 degrees on Sunday. Now, the average high for this time of year is 20 with an average low of 6. The record high was 32 degrees set back in 1981, and the record low was very chilly, -3 in 1931. The sun rose at 6:59 and will set at 7:56. The days are definitely getting shorter. Let's see how Tuesday is looking across the country now. Expect a mainly sunny day in Victoria with a high expected near 19. Clouds mixed with sunshine and a high of 20 is on tap for Vancouver. Sunshine and 19 degrees for Edmonton. Clouds with a chance of showers and a high of only 16 for Calgary. It should be mostly sunny in Regina on Tuesday with a high near 24 degrees. Just a few degrees cooler with clouds and a high of 21 for Saskatoon. Winnipeg should be mainly cloudy, but a balmy high of 29. Lots of sunshine in the forecast in the central part of the country. Expect a clear sky and a high of 22 in Toronto. Sunshine and 20 expected in both Ottawa and Montreal on Tuesday. In Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly sunny and 21 degrees in Fredericton. Clouds and rain and 21 in both Halifax and Charlottetown. And in St. John's, expect clouds mixed with sunshine and a high of 20 degrees on Tuesday. The chances of a labor dispute at Canada's largest airline is getting more likely as Air Canada says talks with its pilots union is not going very well. As Ian Bickus with the Canadian Press reports, the airline and union remain far apart in their negotiations.
The pilots and the union have been negotiating or bargaining for over a year now. There's still some contention over especially wages. There's some reports that the union is pushing for 30 to 60% wage increases. Kind of unclear exactly what they're going to try and stick to. So the airline kind of out today warning that talks are far apart. They're saying that the union salary requests are unreasonable and kind of excessive wage increases. So they're trying to tamp down on some of those expectations.
Alimentation Couche-Tard says it is committed on reaching a deal, but is disappointed in a refusal of its takeover offer by the Japanese owner of 7-Eleven. The Quebec-based convenience store operator argues its proposal offers clear strategic and financial benefits. Now on Friday, 7&I said Couche-Tard's takeover offer grossly undervalues the Japanese company and said the proposal was not in the best interest of its shareholders. 7&I called the offer of $14.86 US per share in cash opportunistically timed and raised concerns about regulatory approval for the deal. A month after a judge declared Google's search engine an illegal monopoly, the tech giant faces another antitrust suit that threatens to break up the company. The U.S. Justice Department and a coalition of states contend that Google built and maintains a monopoly over the technology that matches advertisers to online publishers. Government officials contend that Google has been dominating on both the buy and sell side of the transaction. Google says the case is based on an outdated perception of the internet when desktop computers dominated the landscape. The trial is underway in federal court in Alexandria, Virginia. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 245 points on the day to finish at 23,027. The Dow was up 484 points to 40,829. The S&P 500 was up 62 to 5471, and the Nasdaq was up 193 points to finish at 16,884. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $1.13 to $68.80 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 13 cents to $2.15 US. Gold was up $15.52 to $25.0252 US an ounce, and silver was up 39 cents to $28.32 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $7.48 per bushel, barley is at $5.88, canola is at $13.31, and corn is at $7.26 per bushel. Live cattle October contract was down $1.30 to $183.15. Feeder cattle were up $3.43 to $237.73. Lean hogs October contract was up 90 cents to 87.33, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.80 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, Anthony Olienick and Chris Carbert, also known as the Coutts 2, each received 6.5 years for their roles in the Coutts 2 border blockade from 2022. They were found guilty on charges of unlawful firearms possession and mischief. Actual time served was over 1,400 days, accounting to time and a half, leaving less than 3 years remaining. A Pakistani man living in Canada could receive 20 years behind bars for his involvement in a terror plot in New York. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will share details with us momentarily. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. The Islamic Republic in Iran has allegedly been sending ballistic missiles to Russia as Russia continues in its ongoing fight with Ukraine. Now, to chat about this in more detail is the host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, a lawmaker in Tehran confirmed that the transaction has indeed occurred. In exchange, the Kremlin offered what? Agricultural commodities?
Just support. That's all they need. You know, the Islamic Republic has learned masterfully how to work around the pressures of the West. I mean, under the 4 years of the Biden administration, there's been less pressure, but you know, the Islamic Republic doesn't know who's going to come into office next. They don't know what's going on, so they'd rather find their own new trading partners, and that's exactly how they have raised over $100 billion in the last 4 years under the Biden administration. Once the sanctions were removed, they learned how to do all sorts of things: sell oil to partners like China and Venezuela, sell sell weapons to Russia, as we've seen in this latest report. And these are, they're not strange bedfellows anymore because they have one thing in common, the fact that they want to stick it to the West. So rogue nations of the world unite, and you see the Islamic Republic now has a list of trading partners it can go to replace the West and having to do any sort of economic exchange with the West.
Now, the war between Israel and Hamas continues in Gaza. Lisa, a shooting on Sunday claimed the lives of 3 Israeli guards who were killed at the Allenby crossing along the West Bank Jordan border. Will we see another ceasefire anytime soon?
Doesn't look like it, Hal. And this, latest terror attack, it happened along the Jordan border, as you said, something we haven't seen in a while. So, this do-it-yourself type of jihadism has also sprung up again. It had never really quieted down from that, but there has been a call from Sinwar, who is now basically the de facto head of Hamas, to say, we will begin the suicide bombings again. We will do the car rammings again, all around the world, by the way, Hal. This is targeting Jews around the world and others. We have seen attacks in churches. We have seen attacks in public places in Europe, at music concerts. They want to have their message heard. To the useful idiots on the college campuses in the United States or protesting on the streets of Manhattan or Los Angeles or wherever they may be, this is what we're up against. They will kill any one of us in the name of jihad. And these 3 individuals who died from this terror attack is just the latest. As we know, the Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas, over 100 of them, and no signs that Hamas is ever going to be interested in any sort of ceasefire.
A Pakistani man living here in Canada is facing up to 20 years in prison for allegedly planning a mass shooting in New York in support of the Islamic State. Lisa, the 20-year-old Mohammed Shahzeb Khan, is accused of plotting an attack on a Jewish center in Brooklyn.
Yes. So they recruited this man, 20 years old, Pakistani national, living in Canada. The FBI, together with Canadian police, tracked the phone calls where he was planning on killing as many Jews as possible. And he thought, well, New York is a great place for that goal. And he wanted to attack the Chabad headquarters in Brooklyn, where many people from around the world, Jews and Christians alike, believing in this spiritual rabbi of Chabad who passed away. That's the headquarters of their organization. Go to pay pilgrimage. They go to visit. They go to pray. He wanted to do a mass shooting there to get the highest number of casualties. And thankfully, that plot was foiled with this collaboration.
The Israel Defense Forces say more than 50 rockets were fired by Hezbollah in Lebanon to the northern part of Israel. And fortunately, most of the rockets were intercepted by air defenses. Tell me more about that.
Right. This is the front that you're not hearing about. We talk about the front with Lebanon, between Hezbollah and Lebanon and Israel beginning. That's southern Lebanon and northern Israel. Every day since October 8th, there have been missiles coming in from Hezbollah into Israel, and that's not really talked about. There has been pinpointed targeting, hitting of targets by the IDF, hitting Hezbollah targets throughout the last almost year. But we do see an escalation from Hezbollah coming into Israel. Now, many have been evacuated from that area. They were sent back to their homes and evacuated once again, because we do believe that this escalation will continue for some time. But really, Hal, just to underscore the number of fronts that Israel is forced to fight, all being puppeteered by the Islamic Republic, the regime inside Iran, that is manipulating and funding and training and sending supplies to these proxy terror organizations like Hezbollah and Hamas and others in the region.
Another terror group being funded by the Islamic Republic, the Houthis. Lisa, the Houthis claim to have destroyed another U.S. drone. And that drone was apparently detected operating over Murray Province. Now, this drone, the MQ-9, can operate, for 24 hours at altitudes of up to 50,000 feet. But apparently, allegedly, this one was shot down.
Right. And, it's a little reminder, right? Iran's regime is saying, we can reach you to the United States, and really targeting our assets in the region to say this war is not just focused on Israel, but it is focused on the big Satan, the United States, and the little Satan, Israel. And if you recall, that statement was made by the Ayatollah Khomeini, who is the architect of the Islamic Republic that came into Iran in 1979, toppling the Shah, the king, the Shah of Iran back then. And that has been their goal ever since. So when we do see an attack against the Houthis, as much as the White House has tried to create this daylight between the United States and this war, standing back and just referring to it as a war that Israel is fighting, the United States is involved as well. And when our assets are being targeted in the region, it pulls us into a war whether we like it or not.
The United States has agreed to demands by Iraq, Lisa, for the removal of their military forces from the Middle Eastern country. Most of the 2,500 U.S. troops will apparently be withdrawn by September of next year.
Right. Another withdrawal. And of course, this is something where the United States, regardless of administration, really wants to tread carefully, hopefully having learned a lesson from the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Hal, we talked about all the different proxy groups that the Islamic Republic is funding and controlling. If and when we do withdraw from Iraq, it's another win for the Islamic Republic inside Iran, because they have sent their insurgencies, they have grown their influence inside Iraq. And of course, by withdrawing, by removing our presence, by removing that seat at the table that we have inside Iraq, we do give that influence up for grabs to the terror insurgencies that are supported by Iran's regime. And just to connect the dots, if you look at all the different countries in the Middle East that the Islamic Republic has been able to influence and occupy, they have manifested the Islamic State that they wanted. We went crazy and bonkers in 2014 over ISIS, the Islamic State, and that was a small terror group, a mom and pop shop, if you will, compared to what the Islamic Republic, the actual Islamic State, the Shiite Islamic State, has been able to accomplish over the last 45 years.
Has the Biden administration or any other administrations, even maybe Trump before that, talked about potentially taking out the Islamic Republic, the government in Iran, which is funding a lot of these proxy wars right now, similarly to what the United States did with taking out Saddam Hussein many years ago?
Right. And it's a great question, because you wonder why we wouldn't just remove the head of the snake. You and I have been speaking for how many minutes now, and almost every ailment around the world is being supported by this terror exporting regime. And yet the United States in the last 3 administrations, Trump being the only one that actually put pressure on them, but actually he stopped short of calling for regime change. He wanted behavioral change through pressure and sanctions and other punitive measures. The Obama administration, the Biden administration, if there should be a Kamala Harris administration, are all very welcoming of the Islamic Republic, in the sense that they want to sit down. They want to use diplomacy as the only tool in their toolbox to normalize relations with Iran's regime. Now, before they even began, so when you talk about President Biden, for example, even as a candidate, he ran on getting back into an Iran nuclear deal with no preconditions. He didn't say, I will wait to see X, Y, and Z if they do behave, if we're seeing that the centrifuges are not spinning, if we see that they are, not exporting terror, funding these terror organizations, none of that. So when you're telling your enemy that it's in the bag for them, we're not going to see those behavioral changes, and we're going to see a continuation of that rogue behavior when we're emboldening them, empowering them, and actually allowing them to raise billions of dollars to use in their terror sprees. So really, it's a matter of positioning, it's a matter of policy, it's a matter of rhetoric, and all of that has been favoring the Islamic Republic for the last almost 2 decades.
Lisa, as tensions continue to escalate between Taiwan and China, a pair of German warships will be making their way to the Taiwan Strait in the coming weeks. The presence of the 2 ships will more than likely receive condemnation from China, obviously, because they claim sovereignty over the 170-kilometer wide waterway and the adjoining island of Taiwan.
Yeah, leave it to Germany, of all nations, to want to create this parade of, sending a clear message to China that, we're here too. It's interesting. I think it's interesting that we're seeing different nations try to poke and prod and see, how far China will take this, or how upset they will be at this next provocation. But we'll see what happens when Germany takes a shot at it. We know that the United States also wanted to have presence there. The Philippines also very concerned. South Korea as well. Japan has also expressed that concern. So this is obviously something that's very much escalating. Again, I will bring everyone's attention to the fact that we are in an election year, so we might see things move very quickly. Because they're running out the clock, and Biden will be out of office. So we'll see what will happen between now and January. It should be a very interesting few months ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is imminent. What are your thoughts?
Well, if you were China, that was something that was on your to-do list and on your bucket list. This would be the time to do it. And I hope that we're both wrong in assuming that China, a rogue state, would take advantage and really use this vulnerability that has been created by in the United States. And we had vulnerability under the Biden administration in terms of their approach and their positioning with China. But now it's lame duck. They know he's out. Where is he? He's old. He's senile. What will actually happen? What will be the consequences? And then as we know, Hal, our enemies are very much keen on Kamala Harris becoming president. Iran's regime has stated that. Putin has stated that. I'm sure China would love that because they know that there are fewer consequences with a Democrat, especially Kamala Harris type of presidency, than there would be under a Trump presidency, as we saw in the last administration. So again, it's going to be very, very interesting. But if rogue nations are very much looking into the United States and thinking right now is the weakest we will be unless there is a Kamala Harris presidency, which will probably continue in the same ideology and policy as the Biden administration.
Okay, let's talk about the big debate, which is coming up Tuesday in Philadelphia between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Your thoughts as we head to the November 5th federal election?
I think, it's going to be interesting. I think Kamala Harris is going to arrive very polished, actually. She hasn't given any interviews. She gave the one with CNN where she showed up with her VP pick. I think she's going to be well prepped and memorized and try to dispel, the accusations of her not being able to speak publicly, not being able to formulate, coherent statements about her policy, not even being able to communicate her policy. Actually, in the last 24 hours, her campaign updated their website to have some policy on there. So I think they are out to defend themselves and all the accusations of weakness and lack of policy, and they will try to reverse that. Donald Trump will show up and be Donald Trump, and I think it's difficult coming in as a white man who's trying to defend his former lead against Biden, but now a lot of the polls are showing her in the lead or it being very close. We can't really listen to polls. If you recall the polls between Hillary and Trump, and they were all wrong, and Trump won that election. So it's going to be interesting. I think, a lot of people want to give her a chance. She's a woman. She's a woman of color, as many people are using the phrase. And I think that, as much as she was VP, and the polls were very low. I mean, opinion polls on her were very low. She has been able to rebrand herself as a breath of fresh air, as somebody who's going to bring joy, somebody who's going to bring something new, even though she's actually in office right now. But PR is amazing, right? So and they've done a great job at really shaping public opinion. The media has fallen into line with that as well as social media. So I think it's it's an uphill battle for Trump, who had a very significant lead before she was announced as the candidate. So we shall see. It's going to be very interesting, and we can talk about it next week after we watch.
So do you think Trump's plan of attack will be going after a lot of the policy with Kamala Harris, who's part of the Biden administration, saying, look, you've been in power these past 4 years. What have you done with it?
Correct. And I think that's really the low-hanging fruit, to say, if you're claiming that you will do X, Y, and Z, why haven't you done it? And you're almost setting out to fix the problems you created. So why did you create them in the first place, right? So I mean, we've heard a lot from her about, yes, it's a bad economy. Well, it's your economy. It's the border, the problem. It was your border. You were in fact borders are. So yes, there will be a lot of duh moments. And if he's able to control the conversation and be very well behaved, and I say that because there are many people who are voting on emotion, and it's unfortunate because it's not a smart way to vote. We should vote on policy and the direction and the ideology that this country will take. But there are a lot of Americans, especially young Americans, especially women, a lot of the women in swing states who will define this election and the outcome of it, voting on emotion. And I think that he should, his team should rein him in, behave yourself, speak nicely, and kind of dispel the accusations against him the same way that she will be working to dispel those accusations against her. So it should be very entertaining, to say the least.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the debate. She's our political expert and foreign affairs expert as well, host of the Foreign Desk. Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Hal.
Well, Lethbridge and southern Alberta have a fascinating, rich history to look back upon, and we perhaps don't take enough time to reflect upon it, but today's guest is going to help us do just that. Lorian Johansson is the Vice President of the Lethbridge Historical Society. Welcome to Bridge City News, Lorian. Great to have you on today.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I always love to talk about Lethbridge's history.
Awesome. Okay, well, with that said, maybe give our viewers a brief snapshot of what your organization is all about. It's not just Lethbridge history, right? But southern Alberta, all of southern Alberta?
That's correct. Okay. So the Lethbridge Historical Society is a chapter of the Historical Society of Alberta. Our chapter covers the southern Alberta region, sort of from just south of Calgary down to the border. So it does encompass quite a lot of southern Alberta, including all of the small towns. They are free to access our resources, and we do a lot of work with them as well. We do tend to focus on Lethbridge because that's where we're based, but we do also cover a lot of other things in the region.
Okay, great. Well, maybe give us an idea of what takes place at a typical meeting or gathering of the Lethbridge Historical Society.
Well, we have several different options as far as gatherings. On the fourth Tuesday of every month during September through April, we host a general meeting for our membership where we conduct a little bit of business and then we move into a presentation format. We invite guest speakers from all different walks of life come and speak to our members and guests about things that are relevant or interesting. We've had horticulture, and we've had how to plant a victory garden in your front yard or backyard. We've had, it was fascinating, yes, what kind of vegetables you can grow in southern Alberta that you can then turn around and eat to be a little bit more self-sustaining and environmentally conscious. That was a really great one. We've talked about our plaques and monuments project. Anything that really would be fascinating or interesting to our membership and to the general public. So that's one of the ways. We do also conduct tours, walking tours of the city and local area. Some of them are the Downtown History and Beer Tour, which most people are familiar with. That was initiated by the LHS here. And we do some for general public. We do some for the membership. So we have a lot of tours that take place throughout the year. We have several coming up actually over the next few months. And then the other thing is to join the executive council and sit on the board with the rest of the team. So that happens on Monday. So there's several different ways to get involved.
It sounds like it. So obviously this is something people can join in. How can people maybe join up for your group?
The easiest way is to attend one of the general meetings and sign up for your membership with one of the executive that's there. We do also have a website, lethbridgehistory.org, and memberships are available through there, as well as a contact us form. So if you have questions, you can certainly submit an email request and somebody will be able to guide you through becoming a member.
Okay, so why don't we begin with the name of the city? So I think a lot of people assume the name Lethbridge stems from the famous bridge that spans the coulees, but that isn't necessarily the case now, is it?
It's not at all the case, actually. Lethbridge was named after William Lethbridge. He was the president and largest shareholder of the Northwestern Coal and Navigation Company. You know how the NMAX Center is named after the sponsor, NMAX? Lethbridge is something similar to that. He got the city named after him because of his money that he invested into the company. He never actually visited Lethbridge at all, not even once.
Oh, wow. Well, that's disappointing. So it
It
all
is
comes
a
down to
little.
money, right?
Unfortunately, that's the case. It has
Yeah.
been for a long time.
It's a little bit more of a romantic notion to think it's about the bridge, really. I
Sure.
can see why
Yeah,
the rumor got started.
absolutely. It makes sense, but it's completely a coincidence that it's Lethbridge and we
Right.
have a bridge.
And then we become Bridge City. Yes, I know.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So, I mean, speaking of the bridge, that iconic high level bridge is often referred to as the longest in the world. And there are, of course, longer bridges elsewhere, but I believe it's
There are.
still the longest of its specific type in the world. Can you maybe share a little bit about the history of that bridge?
Of course, the bridge is in fact the longest for its height and style in the world. Nobody has built anything that's longer and higher of the same style trestle
And that would be
bridge.
like the
Uh,
trestle bridge. Yeah.
that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
It was announced in 1906 and completed 3 years later. It is still the largest single railway structure in Canada. It was put into place to shorten the trip to Fort Macleod. Instead of having to go down and around the river valley, the bridge was put in place so that they could just skip over the top and shave off several hours at least of their train journey. The walls on the side of the bridge, you've seen them there. They're to make sure that the trains don't get pushed off by our wind, our beautiful wind in southern
Oh my
Alberta.
gosh, that's
It,
scary.
it's a
I didn't
safety
even think that's a
safety.
possibility, but now that you said it, that's
Well,
scary.
you know, the wind can get pretty powerful down here in southern Alberta, so they put those measures in place. The construction of the bridge is actually considered a national historic event. Over 100 men worked on the construction of the bridge. There were a few deaths during the construction. Safety measures for workers were not what they are now. There is a very famous photograph of 2 men leaping off the last structure to be lowered into place. They were promptly fired after that. They did not die, but they were fired for their shenanigans.
Oh my gosh, I think I have seen that picture, and they're jumping basically
Most
into
people
the
have,
river,
yeah.
right?
But they're jumping from the piece of steel off to the side of the
Yes,
bank.
where the
Yeah.
land is. Okay, yeah,
Yes.
so it's not as high as we think at that point, but
No,
still.
no.
Still, safety first, gentlemen. Come on, let's not give other people ideas, right?
You know, in the early 1900s, they didn't have fall safe harnesses. They didn't have
There
any
was
of
no
those
such
things.
thing as safety back then, basically.
That's right.
I
Which
get
may
it.
be one of the reasons why safety harnesses and whatnot were put into place
Yeah.
as we moved through the 19th and 20th centuries, because people did things like that. I don't know. That's just my speculation, but it makes sense.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so moving on from the bridge, we have a school named after, so we've got some other famous names here in town. So we have a school named after Nicholas Sharon and a hospital named after Sir Alexander Galt. And both were businessmen who started coal mines here. So to what degree did coal mining impact Lethbridge in the early years?
There were over 100 mines in the Lethbridge coal fields, somewhere between Picture Butte and McGrath. In 1919, we were the highest producing coal field in Canada. And it helped to determine where Lethbridge was built. It brought in industries such as Lethbridge Iron Works. Uh, it was a major employer, brought a lot of families to the area, and started other communities like Colehurst and Diamond City. Uh, it's almost impossible to quantify the importance of coal mining to our development. Uh, it it was the founding reason for Lethbridge's construction here. And then as we moved out of coal mining, that's when we moved into more of an agricultural community. But we definitely started as that industrial coal mining location. That's why the city sprang up where it did.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, in addition to that, Southern Alberta has a rich Indigenous history. So the River Valley has a park named Indian Battle Park, where Fort Whoop-Up is located. So maybe share a brief history about that.
The Indian Battle Park is the name that was chosen by City Council in the 1960s. And it specifically refers to a battle in the fall of 1870 between the Blackfoot Nations and the Cree Nations. It was a winter camping area protected from the weather and that. And where the high level bridge is now was a very natural crossing point in the river. We do have a book about the Indian battle that went on there, several different editions. But the story of how these two nations fought over rights to the land and the ability to camp there, it's much more than I could cover in such a short time. But that's why it's named that, because our Indigenous peoples camped there and wintered there to stay safe from the elements.
Yeah, and then of course, speaking of Indigenous people, people from around the world travel to Alberta specifically to visit Head Smashed and Buffalo Jump. So for any viewers who have never heard about this or have ever been there, what is that all about?
Head Smashed and Buffalo Jump it's a national historic site, it's a provincial heritage site, and a World Heritage Site, all of which were designated through the 60s, late 60s into the early 80s. It's a place where the Indigenous peoples would drive the buffalo off the cliff in order to harvest them. It is definitely a fascinating interpretive center there. If you haven't been, I definitely recommend it. It's a very eye-opening look into how Indigenous people manage to hunt in such large capacities. And there are guides and books available online that give you a lot of the details of the history of the location, but where it's one of our national heritage sites that we're very proud to be quite close to Lethbridge.
Yeah, I believe it's a UNESCO heritage site, isn't it? Yeah,
yes.
That's amazing. Okay, now, Lori, and you mentioned agriculture earlier, and of course that is a big part of Southern Alberta, especially the sugar beet industry. So I believe that that also brought quite a few Japanese immigrants to our area. So maybe can you tell us a bit about that?
Hey, the sugar beet industry has been operating in Lethbridge to this day since the early 1900s. You are correct. Some Japanese immigrants moved here. They were recruited to work in the first factory in Raymond and in the beet fields. Some of these families their descendants are still in and around Lethbridge. During the Second World War, 2,500 of these Japanese Canadians were relocated here by the government to work in the beet fields. It was considered later in life, it was considered a human rights violation to uproot these families and move them here with no choice in the matter. The Canadian government did issue an official apology to the families in 1988, but those families did settle here, and some of them remain here to this day, or at least parts of them. So the sugar beet industry has always been important to Lethbridge and agriculture, some for good reason, some for bad, obviously. I mean, history, we like to think of history as this happy, nostalgic style thing, but some of Canadian history is not pleasant and it's not nice. And we have to acknowledge that before we can move out of that cycle. They say history, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. So by studying history and the real, honest, nitty-gritty facts about it, perhaps we can avoid those sorts of things as we grow and develop as a society.
Yeah, the more you learn about it, the more you can avoid it. And yeah, exactly. It's fascinating though, Lorian. And moving on from there, Lethbridge and area are also known for its history of irrigation canals. Much of that was put in place by our Mormon community. So that of course, has really influenced the culture of Southern Alberta, hasn't it?
It has. Lethbridge and Southern Alberta, heavily Mormon. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. They've brought a lot and contributed a lot. The agreement was made by Alexander Galt with the LDS Church so that their settlers would build canals, and then they received land and money as payment for their work. They were brought in because they came from Utah originally, where they were experts in dryland farming and the different skills required. And it was able to transform the area around Lethbridge to make more crops possible because we needed high dollar value crops to be able to be grown here. So that it was sort of they got to move to somewhere new and get land and money for it. We got the benefit of their dryland farming knowledge and irrigation.
I am learning so much here. It's fascinating.
Lethbridge is so rich in history and how all of these things that we see now still. We drive over irrigation canals and we see the sugar beet factories, and we go down to the park and we see the mine sites of 6 and 8, Galt Mine 6 and 8, that are still, the ruins are still there. And Lethbridge exists because these things were brought in, and this area of the world was made hospitable.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's awesome. Thanks so much again for being with us today. It looks like we're out of time, but we really appreciate having you on here, Lorian.
Well, thank you so much. I would just like to mention that we do have several members-only tours coming up in April, June, and October. So if you'd like to get involved with the bars and taverns or the murder mysteries of Lethbridge's past, please go on our website, get a membership, and then those tours will be open for our members. And we welcome members of the public to our general meetings, again, the 4th Tuesday of every month, usually at the community room in the public library.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lorian. Very, very interesting. Great to have you on today.
Thank you again for the invitation.
Absolutely. Lorian Johansson is the Vice President of the Lethbridge Historical Society. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.